Hi everyone and welcome to Reading by the Moon. I am Josephine Moon and tonight our author that we are chatting to is me, which is really weird. Yay! I'm so glad to have some friends here to chat for me because it's very, very weird trying to talk about my own book. So I will just tell you a little bit. Today is release date. Its publication date is out now on everywhere. It's in bookstores and it's online. It's on audio. Cat Stewart, great Aussie actor, famous. Well, I think she's famous, and my favourite actor has done the audio. It's beautiful. And yeah, it's anywhere you want to get a book, you'll be able to find it. But a little bit about the book before we get into questions. The Jam Queens is set in Australia. It follows a family of 5 women over 4 generations who are competitive jam makers. They come from the Barossa Valley, and they all have things going on. There's lots and lots going on for all of them, and there's some family tensions and things like that going on. But they've come together to go on the GAN to travel from Darwin down to Adelaide through the centre of Australia to celebrate Valeria's 70th birthday. So with all that time on the train with some tensions and things, you know, what could possibly go wrong? There's a few things come to light there. It's a good, fun romp through the country. It's a great way to armchair on the GAN. There's a few tears in there if you are sensitive to some of the things in there. There's a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, a lot of food, and a handsome man, and a lot of good things. I think it's a really warm hug of a book, as most of my books, or all of my books are, in fact. So that's a little bit about the Jam Queens. I'm sure everybody else will give you a bit more of a flavour of what's going on as we talk about it. And now I'm going to put my book down and I'm going to pick up my Jamtini. Hopefully you've brought your Jamtini along. And I'm drinking, yes, this is a parfait glass, but because I'm an artist, I'm going to pretend that it is a kind of 1940s Art Deco kind of cocktail glass.
Love
So
it.
that's my Jamtini. And I'm going to hand over to Mary Lou, and I'm going to sit back now and knock things over and have Mary Lou take it away.
Well, you're not exactly going to sit back, Jo, because you will be answering the questions. So let's start off. Now, as you mentioned, the Jam Queen is set on the GAN, and it's an amazing journey, and you've done it so well. I felt like I was on that train with the tiny little compartments and the fold down beds and the drinks car and the tea car and the dining car and the shower. And I'm wondering, what came first, the idea to set a book on the GAN or the trip?
Oh, really good question. Books sort of come together over many years. So casting my mind back, I'm actually not 100% sure, but I think I'm going to say, I think the jam came first because I always build my books from the outside in. So I always need to know what my food theme's going to be, and I need to know my settings. So I had already been down to the Barossa. Yeah, it was definitely that, because I'd been down to the Barossa 4 years ago on a research trip. And I printed out a couple of photos today. I had a technical fail and lost 4 years worth of photos off my computer, but I managed to find a few. That's me sniffing lavender outside the Barossa farmers markets, which is a very famous market. But unfortunately, that's the only evidence I have that I was there. And this is actually my favourite photo of the trip, which is I went with my husband and my son. My son was 4, I think, at the time, and that's at Maggie Beer's farm. She's got all these amazing trees and olive trees and all these things around her. Beautiful farm shop and the water. So that was us playing in the trees there. So we went down to the Barossa. Oh, actually, I should show you that too. That was when I went down, I actually didn't know what my food theme was going to be, and I have had an apple book floating around for many, many years that just hasn't found a way to land yet. So I was really interested in fruit originally. So I was really lucky to get to go to the Trevally orchards. A lot of you would know that Trevally brand of dried fruit. And Shirley Menz, who works there, took me around, and this was freezing. I mean, you may get some idea just from this photo. It was utterly freezing this particular day. I think they might be apricots or peaches, one of the two. I can't remember. Honestly, I just walked around the whole time just shivering. It was just so freezing. Shirley, of course, had the right clothes because she lives down there and knows how to dress, but Queenslanders don't. So I went down to the Barossa. So the location came first, and then so I thought I was trying to write some kind of fruit-based book or an apple-based book, And then came the jam a couple of years after that. It was actually my husband's suggestion. And I first thought, really, jam? And then, but I thought, as I sat with it, I thought, actually, this is getting a bit interesting. And then I started researching it and very quickly came across this idea of competitive jam making. And I thought, I can really get into that. And I really loved this idea of having a whole family of jam makers and that sort of competitiveness within the family. And then I think the GAN, from memory, I don't know exactly, but my uncle Anthony had mentioned it several times that he wanted to go on the GAN. It was a bit of a bucket list item for him. And I think it just sort of got into my head and my subconscious there. And I was driving on the highway one day and it just popped into my head and as a really great idea to go on the GAN. And then my hubby, who's endlessly supportive, went, yeah, you should go and take your sister, go. So that was it. It was a done deal. And so it all just sort of started to come together from there. That's sort of a long answer to where it started from.
That's fine. I love origin stories. And one of my favorite origin stories for this book is Aggie's teen pregnancy. So I think you need to tell us where that inspiration came from, Jo.
The reason Mary Lou is laughing about this is because Mary Lou was involved in this story. Excuse me while I'm just muting a few people there. If they've come in late, as the host, I need to mute you and unmute you, but if you've just come in, we just need you unmute because it upsets the video. Otherwise I'd love to hear from you, but you're welcome to chat in the chat box there too. So I was actually promoting The Gift of Life when this idea of the teen pregnancy came along. And it happened because Mary Lou came with me to this event, and it was at Noosa Library. And one of the booksellers that was there was talking to Mary Lou and myself and was saying, and she said, oh, this is your mother, is it? To Mary Lou, who was standing beside me. And Mary Lou is only 15 years older than me. And so we had a huge laugh at it. So Mary Lou luckily has a very good sense of humour and took this very well and just, you know, we just laughed about this. But I said to her at the time, Mary Lou was sort of saying, you know, what would be really interesting about that is, you know, if I had been your mother, I would have been the sort of mother who would say, yes, go to all the concerts, take all the drugs, because I would never have been able to do it as a teen mom. And so that just got me really thinking about how interesting that would be to have Aggie as a teen mum, and what sort of mother would she be? And she wasn't actually the type of mother who would say, go take all the drugs and go to all the concerts. But it just gave me a lot to play with there. And it was really, yeah, that was the beginning. So all thanks to Mary Lou and that bookseller. It was either Lou or Nat from the River Read. I can't remember which one of them said it.
Oh, it was so funny because when she said, oh, how lovely to have your mum here. And I went, yes. You know, I was 15 when Jo was born and I'm so proud of how she's turned out. Oh, God. But yeah, it was funny. Oh, now I've got to keep an eye on the time so I don't hog the whole thing, which it's quite possibly that I could do. So let's go to Sandy now. Sandy Docker's with us and has some questions for you too, Miss Jo.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Lou. And I've just seen in the chat that Leanne has popped in a question, and it kind of overlaps with the question that I wanted to ask. So I hope you don't mind me stealing your thunder there, Leanne. I've been a big fan of yours from the beginning, as you know, Jo, and I'm so thankful that I can now actually call you friend after, you know, stalking you for many, many years. Right since the tea chest days.
If only all stalkers were as wonderful as you, wouldn't life be great?
Maybe I could give lessons.
Stalking for beginners.
Yeah. Nice stalking for beginners. And I've read all of the books, and obviously food is huge in what you do. And we've had chocolate, we've had tea, we've had coffee, we've had cakes, and now we've got jam. And I wanted to ask you, what is it, do you think, as an author, that is a beautiful marriage with food and fiction? And also for us as readers, how is that a delicious combination for us?
I think for me as a writer, it was never an intentional thing to begin with. So I had been writing for 12 years and I'd been writing across a lot of different genres. And I think it took me a very, very long time to work out what sort of writer I was and what sort of style of story I wanted to put out in the world. And so it didn't really come together. I kept getting very, very close to publication, but never quite crossing the line. And I think it was really when I got the idea for the tea chest, which came very swiftly and very suddenly to me, when I was in a T2 shop smelling all the little teas. And it suddenly occurred to me that it was somebody's job in the world to design tea. And I just thought, that's just brilliant. And if I can't have that job, I want to write about somebody who can have that job. So that was where that started. And then when that book sold, it got a 2-book deal, so I had to write another book. And I'd had so much fun writing, like researching, playing with the teas and designing teas myself and doing all this cool, fun stuff, that I wanted to do it, to keep going with that food thing. So of course I chose chocolate because, you know, why wouldn't you, right?
Why wouldn't you? Exactly.
It's incredible. And I put on a lot of weight that year by eating a lot of chocolate. But then, so for me, I don't know. So I think for me, one, I need to be really inspired about what I'm writing. And I find food very, very inspiring and a lot of fun. So I need to have a lot of fun with what I'm doing, because you're stuck in a book for years, right? So if you're not really engaged with it and not having fun with it, then it really becomes a chore. It becomes quite difficult. So for me, it's really great that way. And I find that it grounds me in the story. So anytime I've sort of lost my way in the book, I sort of sit down and I think, well, how can I bring this back with the food? And the food sort of manages to ground me in the plot as well. So it becomes very much a driver of the plot and a driver of characters and that sort of thing. As for readers, I mean, I didn't really think about the sort of other end of it at the time. It was just really about, I was really, really enjoying it. But readers do tell me a lot how much they love learning about food, because I do go into, you know, history, and I go into ethics, and I go into a lot of the craftsmanship and that sort of thing with food. And people do tell me that they love that aspect of my writing. So yeah.
I also wonder whether it's tied into that philosophy, and it's many, many cultures around the world that have the philosophy that food is love. And therefore the combination of food and fiction, it is, as you said at the top of the chat, it's like wrapping your readers in a warm hug, because food is love.
Absolutely. And it's something that is common to all cultures and all families. And it grounds everybody and brings everybody together. And everybody's got memories of, you know, their grandmother's food or their family food. Like, so much of our rituals and our celebrations are all grounded in food. So it is a very, very a connecting device, I guess. Yeah.
And especially in this book, because you do have all the different generations of women, all the jam queens in here, and it is a very binding theme through the whole thing. It is a beautiful book. We are celebrating Josephine Moon's latest book, The Jam Queens. It's the book birthday today. And Marie-Louise, you've been part of Jo's process through all of this, and you've got an interesting question, I think.
Hi everyone. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. Thank you, Jo. You're very clever. Good story. My question for you tonight is, I happen to know that, well as two of my favorite characters in the book, Myrtle and Dulcie, who were just hysterical and just added so much richness and warmth and humor to the story. I happen to know that you and your beautiful sister Amanda happen to call each other by those names. So I was wondering, A, how that came to be, B, whether you called each other those names first and then you named your characters after yourselves, and C, what likenesses you have with each of those characters.
It's a very good question.
It is.
So Madeline Dolls were unplanned characters, and most of my characters are unplanned. I have a vague idea of who's on the train, but when I went on the GAN, I didn't have a set list of who was in the book at that point. I was still just researching and gathering data. So I went with my sister, and my sister's a great traveling companion. She's been with me on a writing trip to England, to the Cotswolds. She came with me to Italy. you know, she goes and does chocolate making courses with me. Like she's great at just she's so supportive, and she just jumps in and she does all the stuff, and she loves traveling, and it's great because she makes sure I get on the right plane and things like that, which is really good. Make sure I stay on track. But we just have a lot of fun together. So we decided to go on the GAN, and I don't know, something happened on that train where we were for the most part, the youngest people on the train, definitely. And I think we really only saw one other couple who were from New Zealand who were maybe about our age, but everyone else was a lot more senior. And they were just so inspiring. So every time you sit down to eat, they match you with different people, you know, on the train. And so you keep meeting people. And we just had such brilliant conversations with these people. And a lot of them were in their 70s and 80s and climbing up and down bunks on trains and doing all these amazing things. And they were just so inspiring and so interesting. And we just had so many great conversations. And I think somewhere along the line, we found our inner 80-year-olds. So we aged ourselves a good 40 odd years, and somehow we became Myrtle and Dolls. I'm not really sure when we turned into Myrtle and Dolls, but at some point we decided on the names of Myrtle and Dolls. I said I'm Myrtle, and then Amanda somehow decided that she was Dolls. And so we started chatting like we were 80-year-olds, and we were just so in character, and they just had to become part of the novel because, you know, and Myrtle and Dolls in the book are as I said, in their 80s, but they've been friends, they've been besties since they were in their 20s. So they're, you know, 60 odd years of friendship there. And so they're so close, and they're basically sisters, I guess. I mean, I think one of them, Myrtle, I think says, you know, I mean, they're not married, they're not lovers, they're not, you know, actual sisters, but they couldn't possibly be any closer than they are. And they have such a great dynamic. And I just really found it so just fun. And so every time I sat down to write a scene with them, I was just like, oh, this is me and my sister, and this is what hopefully we aspire to be doing, you know, in 40 years time. I hope we're still traveling the GAN in 40 years time and having a great time. But yeah, they're a major highlight of the book. They really were just so fun. Their scenes just flew off the page. Yeah,
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, they are absolutely gorgeous. I also love the character of Harry, and I know that he actually was born in the Cake Maker's Wish.
he was.
Made his way over to the Jam Queens instead. He was just up in the wrong book to start with. But how did you adapt him into the Jam Queens? Was there a lot of work in that?
Not really. That was part of the joy of Harry, was that he had spent so long in the Cake Maker's Wish, because I was convinced that Harry belonged there. He wasn't in there sort of right at the start. He sort of wormed his way in, and then he became really, really engrossed in the book and the story. And so I got to know him very, very well. And there's a lot of scenes that I know that were in the Cake Makers, which I stripped out because, of course, Harry got taken out of the Cake Makers because he didn't belong in there. I eventually worked out he didn't belong in that book. He'd walked into the wrong book. He needed to be in the next book. And but there was so much of his backstory that I already knew. And I think he just aged about, about 4 years or so. So he was just a tiny bit older and a tiny bit wiser than he had been in Cake Makers, which made him a much more grounded character to work with in the Jam Queens. And I love Harry. I loved him so much in Cake Makers, which is why I wanted him so much to be there, because I really just loved him so much. But he totally belongs where he is now. And yeah, he's a real joy. There are a lot of really joyful characters in here that were just really easy to write. And so, in fact, Valeria was the same. Valeria was a very, very easy character to write. It's a very strong voice. That's such a joy as a writer when characters just, you know, turn up like that and are just so clear with what they want.
I also just putting my hand up, but I just loved Rupert.
Yeah.
I loved him. I was like, he's just such a beautiful, beautiful person.
You had a bit of a thing for Rupert, didn't you? Like,
I did. I actually had a bit of a thing. What was your comment? 70s the new 40? Was that it? 40, surely. Like, seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, he's really nice too.
Yeah, he was lovely. Yeah,
and I loved Gideon. I loved Gideon as well. Gideon
was gorgeous. And I always love that about your books, Joe, is that you always write men who are just so not only rich but just really nice characters. You know, just really full, nice. It doesn't feel like a stereotype or a trope or anything. It actually feels like a real rounded character. And yeah, they're all just really beautiful men. But yeah, Rupert was.
Oh, thank you for that. That's a really nice compliment, because I do always say that I do, with very few exceptions. There's you know, I mean, Three Gold Coins, there was an out and out bad guy in there, but generally speaking, I try and write good men, because I do think there's an absence of men. They do tend to get cast, good men, sorry, they tend to get cast as the killers, the abductors, the detectives, the whatever, but there's not a lot, or the cheaters or the deadbeats or whatever. There's not a lot of just really good men who are going through life and doing their things and supporting their family and supporting and just being good humans and good citizens. And they can still have difficulties, and you can still, you know, have them going through stuff, but they can just be good while they're doing it, you know, which I think is the majority of men. And, you know, and I want good role models for my son, and I think they're just good representations.
And talking about going through stuff, Aggie actually does go through a lot in this book. Some of it, a lot of it is actually with Gideon. So I'm wondering about the IVF and the stillbirth issues that are in this book, Joe. What inspired them? And stillbirth especially, I think, is very hard to write about. So how did you approach that?
It is very hard. And the stillbirth, the idea of stillbirth, so when I approach books, I never set out with this is an issue I want to deal with. It's generally something that comes through quite organically when I'm working through, like, getting to know the characters, and when I'm working through plots, and I'm asking myself a lot of questions, like, why is this person behaving like this? What are their backstory? What's happening? So I had started, again, another version of the Apple book many years ago, which I had started to set in New York. And I had that sort of vague idea of this Aggie character who'd lost a baby in New York, an Australian in New York. And then that didn't go anywhere. I start a lot of books, you might get this. I start a lot of ideas and then I drop them often and put them aside. And, you know, sometimes they marinate for a few years and come back. And so it sort of had started over there a long time ago. But I guess in my own life, I know a shocking number of women, really shocking, who have experienced stillbirth, who have experienced neonatal death, who have had a baby, you know, pass from SIDS, who've had late-term miscarriages, who've had just incredible tragedies. And, you know, I don't think that big of a network of friends. So for me to know that many people who've experienced that, you know, it really shocks me. And I carry a lot of empathy for those women. And I think it's one of those things that still isn't really talked about a lot, people are afraid of it. They're afraid to go to the pain. They're afraid to ask. They're afraid to put it on the page. And so I wanted it to be there. But at the same time, having not been through that myself, I didn't want to put it myself there as I'm an expert on this, you know, topic. So the other thing that was it was sort of there in the background, which is why I've sort of aged, you know, or moved them on 2 years. And so we've got a bit of space for them to be able to reflectively deal with it rather than being in the crisis itself, which I think when I first started it in New York, I was sort of in the moment with it, and it was just too much, and I was crying too much, and it was all just too much, and it was too sad, and it was too heavy, and I was never going to be able to move them forward. I wanted to be able to take them from a place of being sort of stuck to some kind of renewal in some way. And the IVF one just came about because I heard a radio interview. It was a Mamma Mia podcast called The Quickie. They do a news segment every day, and then they do a deep dive into an issue. And this idea came up with that what happens at the end of an IVF cycle, which I had never considered. The closest I ever got to anything to do with IVF was having a blood test in my early 30s. They can test what sort of reserves of eggs you've got left. And apparently mine were quite low. And they just went, well, that rules you out. If you ever need IVF, it's ruled you out. You can't do it ever. And I was like, oh, wow, that was quite a shock. It was quite unexpected. But that was sort of, you know, that's as close as I've ever got to any IVF discussion. But I just felt like that was a really, really unique challenge for people, you know, when you've gone through what is already a very difficult physical, mental, emotional journey, something that's very difficult for a partnership. And then, wow, now you've got to add on that extra level of how do we deal with these remaining embryos? And then what if you've actually already broken up with the person who you made the embryos with? That sort of brought that opportunity then, I guess, for Aggie and Gideon to either, you know, mend their hearts enough to come back together, or mend their hearts enough to let each other go with sort of grace and love and move on in life, because they're both in that state of limbo of neither really, they've separated, but neither have really moved on. It was just a lot to sort of, yeah, it was just, it was a lot for me to deal with. So it's always fun, not fun, I don't want to trivialize it, but it's always rewarding, I guess, to then work it out on the page and have my characters kind of work it out.
You handled it so beautifully, and the scenes with the baby and how that was handled and everything, it was so beautifully done and really heartfelt. So yeah, there's a lot happening in this book.
Yeah, there's always a lot happening. I'll say there that the first draft of this book, I mean, as far as books go, like every book has its own challenge, and some books are super hard to write and some are a lot more straightforward. This one was actually a real blessing. The hardest part on this book was that I had in the first draft, Holly, Aggie's grown daughter, was overseas, and I had a whole other family on the train with Aggie. It was her best friend and her best friend's family. And at the end of the first draft, it was like, yeah, they don't really belong there, and Holly needs to be back here. So I had to write out that whole family, which was a bit sad because there were couple of really quirky characters in there I really liked, but they didn't belong there. That's what writers do. That's that phrase, kill your darlings. You're just like, well, they don't serve the story, so they've got to go. And then I had to bring Holly back from the US and put her back on the train, which was great. Yeah.
Well, that family may turn up in another book, just
They
like
might
Harry
do. That's right.
Sabrina, did you want to say anything about
Yeah, I certainly do. I was looking through my phone the other day, Jo, and I found when I first came to your event.
Wow.
So I'd like to echo what Sandy said, and I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, I was a stalker to begin with as well. So I'm glad that I call you a friend now, and congratulations on this beautiful book. I really am enjoying it very much. It is very much like a warm hug, but also like a travel brochure. I'm just loving being able to travel every single night. It's just so picturesque. I'm absolutely loving it. So thank you so much. I guess just a little question from me, just to bring it back to lightheartedness, is what music did you play to your jam with the recipe in the back of the book?
Yes, so my prize-winning jam recipe is in the back, and yes, I played music to my jam, and that's a good question because I had never made jam before making jam for this book, and I made 4 batches before I entered it into the show. And I think the 4th batch was the one I just went, well, that's it, we'll enter that one. And I think I've played a variety. So I did play a bit of classical and some Pachelbel's canon in there, but I also had quite a bit of country going on as well. I think I was in a bit of a Morgan Evans phase, so I think there was a fair bit of Morgan Evans playing to this jam as well. That's mostly what I remember, but yeah, there was a variety, but there was definitely quite a bit of country.
Wonderful.
We're almost out of time, but Helen has asked a question in the chat. Do you read, Jo, while you're writing? And
I do read. I read almost all of my books on audio these days. I really, really struggle to read off a page. I'm in a weird middle-age eye crisis where I'm just in between, like they can't quite give me reading glasses, but I can't quite read properly without them either. And so it's just really, I just fatigue out off the page. But yeah, I've always got an audio book going all the time. Yeah, I do. But I'm a very slow reader too. It's a real impediment for a writer because I have to read so much, but I'm incredibly slow, really, really slow. So audiobooks are good. They kind of keep me going a bit faster.
Well, Jo, it is an absolute treasure of a book. It's been wonderful to help you launch it tonight. So many beautiful characters with such fabulous names, and your obsession with Maggie Beer just shines through.
read it
Yes.
yet, Joe?
Definitely.
Has Maggie read it yet?
She left a message on Facebook the other day saying that she was a little afraid to read it because of the amount of gushing I'd done about her. But I assured her it wasn't. It was all fine. It was all good. She's promised she will read it. So I know she's been very busy. She's very busy, Maggie. She's doing a lot of stuff. She's been doing a lot of aged care conventions, and you know, she's really passionate about feeding our brains for aged care and things like that.
Brilliant.
Yes, but I would like to, Sabrina, just say too that everyone here on this panel is here because of writing and reading, which is really cool. It was really cool to meet Sabrina and Marie-Louise, and you know, and as friends from people who actually just loved my books, and that was just a real joy and really lovely. And then it's really lovely to have so many awesome writer friends like Mary-Lou and Sandy, and it's just such a joy. There's so much. The books are just keep on giving and giving and giving, and all you people who come along tonight, you're all just awesome. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Well, bravo, Joe. Cheers.
Well done.
Jamtini for all. And
Jamtini.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. It's beautiful.
Yeah, let's launch this into the world. I hope everyone just, you know, enjoys it, loves it. It's beautiful. And
Yes.
wishing it so much love as it enters the world.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Mary-Lou and Sandy, for hosting and keeping us on track, or keeping me on track while I ramble. That's really cool.
Awesome.
Thank you. We'll see you next month. We're chatting to Ali Sinclair about her book, The Code Breakers. So we'll get on to reading that one.
Yes.
See you all next month.
Thanks so much. Mwah.
Mwah.
Bye.